Hello, everyone. Please let me know if you can hear me correctly. I see the chat is populating. Oh, hi, Magic of Carls. How are you? Okay, great. Because last time we had some problems with the audio, so hopefully that doesn't happen today. Um, but yeah, I don't. I did my best to fix it, but I'm not a computer person, so hopefully you guys can hear. Oh, hi, Iconoclast 94. How are you? Um, Sorry again for changing the time of the event of the stream. Sorry, just things have been a little bit crazy lately. So switching to today, hopefully, is not that big of a problem to most of you. And also, I guess it fits with the topic that we need a little bit more urgency than normal. It's good to hear, Magic of Carols. Um, because, well, as you probably know if you follow me on Twitter, the world's gone crazy, and we've been discussing for, I mean, days now these attacks in Lebanon. So I thought it would be a good idea to like go through these events with a little bit more nuance than what Twitter allows. If you are here for the first time, please say hi in the chat. I would love to know if you are here for the first time. Um, and just so you get an idea of what we do here, the main problem with Twitter is that everyone fights, and that's not conducive to learning, to talking, to anything. Um, and so the objective here is to have a little bit more of an interactive setting where we can just share a space where we want to learn together and do stuff together about international law and learn about international law together. Um, Flip from Nowhere, how are you? Flip from Nowhere says, "How could they be legal if innocent civilian children were murdered?" Well, that's part of the thing that I wanted to discuss with you today. And as you guys know, there's usually an ad on the first 3 minutes of our stream. So before I start talking on the nitty gritty details of the operation, let's talk about more general things and then get into the the analysis itself. Um, but that's one of the main things. Perhaps it's a good thing to start with this. Um, International humanitarian law, the law of war, is terrible. It sucks. I hate it. I study it for a living. I've studied its history, and I can tell you it is a horrible set of rules. So what I tell my students when I used to, I no longer teach international humanitarian law, but when I used to teach international humanitarian law, I would tell my students, this is a set of rules that are meant to regulate and in some ways also sometimes enable some of the worst things that human beings can do. So, as far as I'm concerned, legality is not enough for me to say that something is good or that something is moral. So, under international humanitarian law, and we have a whole stream explaining what is international humanitarian law on the channel. So, if you want to go to my YouTube channel, you will find the stream on international humanitarian law, and you can catch up a little bit on what I'm talking about. Of course, don't do that now. um, but it's the body of rules that applies in times of armed conflict. And in time of armed conflict, we sort of accept that peaceful resolution of disputes is sort of done. Like we've already failed at this. And that's the main thing, that in times of armed conflict, it is possible, it is legal to do an operation where, as a result of your actions, civilians die, and that will still be legal because we approach them and understand them as incidental civilian harm. Of course, that is sometimes sort of like misunderstood and denaturalized as a almost as if there was like a set amount of civilians that you can kill and it'll still be legal. That's not the object and purpose. Um, yeah, from nowhere, collateral damage is a rude way of talking about incidental civilian harm. I would distinguish the two. Um, because so collateral damage is sort of like, oh, it's what happens when you do an attack, right? That's the logic. It's this logic of, oh, I can still get more dead civilians and it'll still be legal. And I just think that's the wrong way of approaching this. Incidental civilian harm is when you carry out an attack, people may die, and you need to make sure that the least amount of people die, so that the amount of casualties, civilian casualties of your actions, is proportionate, or at least not disproportionate, to whatever you wanted to achieve with that attack. Right? So the general logic of proportionality, which is what Magic of Carols is asking, is we accept that under international humanitarian law, under the law of armed conflict, you need to attack only those who are valid military targets, combatants. And I know some of you have gone on a break, so I'll be mindful of this as we go forward. Um, but on an ad break, sorry. But um, so we accept that you can only attack military targets. But in those kinds of operations where you will attack military targets, sometimes, yeah, I know there's an ad. Hold on, gotcha. So sometimes when you are in a uh, attacking a military target, civilians may die. And you may anticipate that civilians may die in that attack, so long as you don't attack or harm a disproportionate amount of civilians. That incidental harm, that harm that you basically could not prevent, will be legal. And that is, I guess, the key thing here, right? It's the harm that you could not prevent. There's a principle that's not discussed as much in international humanitarian law, which is the principle of precautions in attack. What does precautions in attack mean? Is that whenever you launch an attack, you need to take precautions to minimize the harm to civilians. So it's not, okay, here's my bag of dead civilians that I can, you know, account for, and my operation will still be legal. That's not how it works. Right? So I think everyone is back from the ad now. So I'm going to restate what I said in a second. So essentially, briefly, what I was talking about while some of you were in an ad is the idea that we need to distinguish proportionality from just this random amount of civilian collateral damage that you can tolerate in an armed conflict. Proportionality means that when you are launching an attack on a military target, incidentally, as part of your actions, some civilians may die, and you may anticipate those civilians dying, so long as their deaths are not, or the harm that you cause them is not disproportionate to the military advantage that you're going to get because because of your attack, right? So, in crude terms, is like if you have a unique opportunity to kill the leader of the opposing army, but to do so, some civilians may be harmed. That is still legal. And it is crude, it is morally questionable, but it is how we operate. But even when that is the rule, that's not the same as saying, look, there's enough civilians here that I can just accumulate, and it doesn't matter how many I kill so long as I don't get to this like 20. I can kill up to 20 civilians because this guy is worth 20 civilians. That's not how you're supposed to do it. You're supposed to do it in a sense that it's almost inevitable. You try to avoid those deaths, but you can't. So if you're having like this bag of dead civilians on your shoulder, over your shoulder, then you're doing proportionality wrong. So from nowhere, we'll get to that in a second, okay? Because I really do think that it's important to like build up a case for this attack, okay? Um, So let me get off the really general questions out of the way first, and then we can talk about the specific questions about the attack. Look, let's organize this session in a way that I can address specific questions first, then I can explain to you what I think is the applicable law, and then we can go into more specific questions. Okay? That makes sense to me. So 3 Mustafar 66 says, what is the degree of consensus on attacking members of an armed group, wing of an organization while off duty? So this is an interesting question because I saw it a lot on social media. That how can you attack people that are quote unquote off duty doing groceries? That cannot be legal. And there is an argument to be made about attacking people that are not mobilized. Okay. Um, so, for example, if you attack a reservist in the Israeli army, someone that is not deployed, that would be illegal. But under international law, especially under humanitarian law, people who are participating in hostilities, people who are engaged in an armed force as members of an armed force, they have special rules attached to them. When two states are fighting each other, that is known as the privilege of combatancy, the combatant status, um, which doesn't really exist when we're dealing with non-state actors like Hezbollah, but there's an equivalent term that I'll get to it in a minute. Okay, so what you need to understand is when two states are engaged in war, combatants, the soldiers that fight, are liable to attack at any point wherever they are. Doesn't matter the geography, doesn't matter the time. They could be sleeping. You can still kill them. They can be far away on leave. As long as they're deployed and on leave, they're still targets. Okay, so you do, as a combatant, you get the ability to kill others, but also the ability to be killed anywhere, right? So in the context of a non, sorry, I'm a little bit sick, so I'll cough every now and then. In the context of a non-international armed conflict, that is, a state and a non-state actor, we don't acknowledge that there is a combatant privilege, a combatant status, because non-state armed groups like Hezbollah don't get privileges that belong to states. We don't want to equate them to states, right? But so in non-international armed conflicts, we discussed this in the previous video. Targetability depends on the ability that on your ability to be directly participating in hostilities. You are only a target when you are directly participating in hostilities. Okay, this comes from a an article I'll show you here. Hold on, I prepared here. So this comes from an article called Article 51 of the additional protocol to the Geneva Conventions. Okay, it applies to international armed conflicts, but generally, um, this is sort of like customary law and applicable to all conflicts. And as you can see in paragraph 3 of this article here of the additional protocol to the Geneva Conventions, civilians shall enjoy the protections afforded by this section, quote, unless and for such time as they take direct part in hostilities. Right. So what does this article, what does it mean? Right. To this idea that everyone is a civilian in a non-international conflict, but when a civilian directly participates in hostilities, all of a sudden they become a valid target, unless and for such time. So what does it mean to participate in hostilities for such time? How long does that last? So as we saw in the previous video, the humanitarian law video, that can mean that you get up a weapon, you pick up a weapon, you start shooting. And when you drop that weapon, you're no longer participating in hostilities, so you're no longer a target. If you're just a random guy in a conflict that picks up a weapon, that's how it works. But if you belong to a armed force, that is, you're not just some random person that's participating in hostilities in the moment, but you are a permanent member of an armed force, then individuals that fit into that uh, are set to be, at least under the interpretation of the International Committee for the Red Cross, participating in hostilities with a longer degree of involvement, not just isolated involvement. And so they lose their protection for a longer period of time. And there's a lot of disagreement as to how we should measure that participation, that long-term participation in an armed force, like being a member of Hezbollah's armed forces, for example. There's differences in how to measure it. The International Committee for the Red Cross and the United States, for example, they disagree. Okay, so for the Red Cross, for the ICRC, you can only, I also have a slide for that, hold on. here you go, for the Red Cross, um, for you to become a target permanently, it's not just while you're holding the gun, but permanently as a member of an armed force, you need to have that thing that they call, quote, continuous combat function. So they say you can be a member of a group, of an organized armed group involved in an armed conflict, but um, that doesn't mean that you have a combat function, that you are um, part of the military wing, let's say, of of the group. So if you are the cook, right, um, that means that you don't really fight. Um, you're just making dinner for people in the armed group. Or if you are the doctor that cures people, right, um, in the group, you're the group's doctor. Or you're the person who let's say trains or handles propaganda for the group. You don't really fight. And if you don't fight, then you should be considered a civilian for as long as you're not fighting on a continuous fashion. If you pick up a weapon and you're the group's doctor, then you are liable to be attacked while you have the weapon in your hands. When you drop it, you're back to being the doctor of the group. And as the doctor, you shouldn't be attacked because you're not part of the military wing, right? So that's the ICRC. The ICRC says as long as you don't have this continuous combat function within the group, you don't become a permanent target. You will only be targetable if you participate occasionally while you are participating in hostilities, right? But if you become a member of um, so for example, in I don't know, I can't think of a name right now, but if you get involved in the military wing of a group and you have a job that involves going in there and fighting and shooting people, then if you drop your weapon and go to a farm and you start farming and you're farmer by day, combatant by night, that doesn't matter. You're still a combatant for the purposes of the ICRC, and you can still be targeted because you have assumed a continuous combat function. The United States thinks that the ICRC standard is too um, narrow. It covers too few people. The United States wants to be able to attack more people, right? Um, so the United States says no, 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 and it's manual on the laws of war. They say no, no, it's not about whether you have a continuous combat function. It's about whether you have significant enough contribution to the war effort. So, for example, the doctor, the United States says, I accept the doctor of the armed group is not subject to attack, but the guy that trains them, the propaganda machine guy, those two, they are targetable because they contribute to the overall effort, overall military effort. So there's a disagreement between different scholars about who should be targeted. But all of them agree, even the United States, that just membership, like just having an ID card, is not enough to qualify as a target. Okay, I do want to put that clearly because there's been a lot of discussion lately about whether that is true or not. And I can assure you, just because you have an ID card for a non-state armed group doesn't mean that you're a target. Okay, but once you have that continuous combat function, or if you subscribe to the U.S. view, which in my opinion is too broad, you contribute enough to the war effort of that group. Once you do, you are a target, just like that soldier that was on leave during, I don't know, during whatever war. You are a target wherever you are. The limitation is not whether you're a target or not. The limitation is whether you can comply with distinction and proportionality. You comply with distinction if you attack that person with the continuous combat function. You're not attacking a civilian. You're attacking someone that has a membership in a non-state armed group, in an armed force, right? Um, but you still need to comply with proportionality, meaning that you cannot just, let's say, to use a silly example, but an example from the real world, you cannot destroy an entire building, like this building where I am right now. You cannot just destroy it because my neighbor has a continuous combat function in an armed group. Right? Because then you would be treating me not as incidental civilian harm, but as like I can do whatever I want. right? I can kill sufficient numbers of civilians if my military advantage is large enough. Right? So the act of targeting Hezbollah fighters while they're doing groceries is not per se illegal. Um, it can be illegal if you fail either the precautions principle, so you need to take precautions before an attack, um, or if you fail the distinction check, so you were not really targeting a civilian, or if you fail a proportionality test, meaning that you killed too many civilians in your attack. Right? But the act of targeting members of Hezbollah in grocery or far away from the battlefield in itself is not enough evidence to say that it was illegal. Right? So let me build from that. Let me go to the chat and see what's going on here. Just one person out there. Hi, how are you? Says, is it the same as Nuremberg trials? I mean, not every German was prosecuted and sentenced. Yes, I mean the concept of direct participation in hostilities is not exactly applicable to in the same way to World War II because like it's sort of like a later development. Um, but yeah, there were Nazi collaborationists that were declared innocent at the Nuremberg trial. And I mean, we can discuss whether they should have. Some of them shouldn't have, but that's a different topic. Fled from Nowhere asks, so in other words, if you aren't violent, even if you officially belong to the adversary, you're still considered a protected civilian under the Geneva Conventions? I would say yes. So let's imagine that, to make a silly example, let's imagine that tomorrow, the whatever party, X party in the United Kingdom decides to launch a revolution. Um, Not everyone who is a militant of that party is a target under that armed insurrection. Um, this is why many groups have like a military wing and a political wing. And, like only those people that are continuously engaged in combat operations are targets. This doesn't mean exactly being violent, to use Flat from Nowhere's um, terminology, because you can be non-violent and still have a combat function. Say, for example, that you're the guy who decides who gets killed. You sit on a desk and you say, today you're going to kill John, right? A military target, John the soldier. You are still having a function there that is related to combat. You yourself are not committing the violence. Does that make sense? Um, to Condor92, how are you? Says, couldn't that bite them, the US, in the in the butt? Can you expand? I maybe missed what you were saying at that time. Flat from Nowhere says, mayor membership doesn't make you lose protections as a civilian. No, mayor membership doesn't. Like, just because you have a Hezbollah ID card doesn't mean that you are necessarily a target. It's a factor to consider, but it's not evidence that you are a target under international humanitarian law per se. Um, Gamer Jame says, an unexpected byproduct of delegitimizing mental health is that it's feeding conservative talking points that more people on the left have mental health issues. Though in reality, conservatives I think that's off topic. Okay, so um, I think so. We can let me know if you have any more questions about like generic questions. If not, we can start looking into this specifically. Okay, and we can give me a few minutes to start explaining this from the perspective of international humanitarian law. Um, Condor says it was regarding the Red Cross and the U.S. It's different views. Oh yeah, yeah. Okay, we'll get into that in a second. Um, okay, so um, let me explain what happened. Give me a few minutes, and then we can talk specifics. Okay. So, as I think everyone knows at this point, everyone here at least probably knows, what happened in Lebanon is that, as far as we know, okay, take this with a grain of salt because information is still incomplete. Hezbollah, an armed group uh, that targets civilians indiscriminately, and so I do consider them a terrorist group, just in case someone is wondering. Um, because if you target civilians, then you meet at least my definition. Um, and this group abandoned use of cell phones out of fear of geolocalization and started buying pagers as a lower tech, you know, device that couldn't be tracked. So at some point, Israel decided to set up a fake company in the EU, a ghost company, that sold pagers and eventually sold pagers to Hezbollah that had explosives inside that could be triggered at a distance. As far as we know, from what I've seen in reports, Hezbollah started, um, how do you call it, analyzing their devices, checking for threats, and they were getting close to discovering that their pagers had bombs inside. So, in sort of like a use it or lose it moment, Israel detonated thousands of pagers around Lebanon around 5 months after the original delivery of the pagers. So they sold the pagers to Hezbollah, and then 5 months later detonated something like 3,000 pagers. Um, and then the next day and the day after, other electronic devices started exploding as well. For example, walkie-talkies. We understand that the main issue was without being able to use their pagers, they turned to walkie-talkies, and so they exploded the walkie-talkies. Right. So when I first saw the news, my general impression was, okay, there is a way where this attack could be legal. Uh, the first thread that I wrote on Twitter, if you go and check it out, was there is a chance that these attacks can be legal. How so? Because if you use a sufficiently small payload that can only possibly affect one person, and you make sure that every person who is getting their pagers exploding is a target, meaning has a continuous combat function or has, sufficient membership in Hezbollah to be a valid target, and you know that they are a target, then that would be sufficient to satisfy one, the precautions principle, because you checked, right? Second, the distinction principle, because every single person whose pager exploded was a valid target. And three, the proportionality principle, because you used a sufficiently light payload to guarantee that no one else would be harmed, right? And so at that point, my initial concern was like, wow, this is very different from what we've been seeing lately. Um, and of course, it would still be a violation of Lebanese sovereignty because if you explode 30,000 pagers and kill, I think, like 30 people and injure 2,000 and something, that is a violation of your sovereignty. So we can discuss whether that makes it illegal as well under human rights law. Um, but under IHL, I thought, well, it could be, if you only analyze it from the perspective of IHL, it could be legal. But as more evidence started appearing, it soon became clearer to me that what we were seeing was not a very discriminate attack against Hezbollah en masse, but, and I will explain what I mean by this, a series of indiscriminate attacks carried out in Lebanon against an undetermined objective, or at least a relatively indeterminate objective. And as such, it would be an indiscriminatory attack, and all indiscriminatory attacks are illegal under um, international humanitarian law. So let me go step by step. Okay, let me analyze this step by step. What do I mean by this statement that I have just made? Okay? And of course, I do want to remind you this is my opinion based on what I know about international humanitarian law. Um, this is neither me giving you any kind of legal advice or me telling you what is the official interpretation of these facts. You can absolutely disagree with me, and I'm happy to like do so here. So I don't own the truth about this event. Okay, but let's go step by step. Right. So the first thing that I would want to do is to ask myself, um, what is what is it that happened? And I've seen in the media a lot of reports about how the the thing that happened was a quote attack, a single attack on Hezbollah, a very targeted attack on Hezbollah, because it only targeted people that were, you know, valid targets within Hezbollah. And I that's the first thing that I've seen in the media that I would very much contest. Um, this is Article 49 of Additional Protocol 1 to the Geneva Conventions. It deals with the definition of an attack. So, what does it mean to launch an attack under international humanitarian law? You can see in paragraph 1, it says attacks. Attacks means acts of violence against the adversary, whether in offense or in defense. And I just noticed someone followed me and I couldn't see because I had the image on top. But oh, it's a Kodosh22. Thanks for following me. Welcome to the community. So okay, so we're dealing with um. Really need to lower down that sound. Oh, I'm so sorry about that. I'm gonna try. Hold on. Let me see how I can do that. Uh, alert box. Okay, it's muted, so it should work. The alert box is now muted. Let me see. Uh, yeah, so it should be fine. Sorry about that. I don't know how that works. I'm not very good with this. Um, but I have in my mixer I've now silenced the alert box. Um, okay, so we were talking about Article 49 and the definition of an attack. Just so you know, you have an ad coming up in 2 minutes. You, it's becoming a tradition. Sorry about that. I'll see what I can do. Maybe I can just set up another alert box. I think the problem is that my microphone is too low. I'm not sure how to fix it. So if anyone wants to like be good to me and help me do it, help me fix it, I would appreciate it. Um, but yeah, so let's go back to Article 49 and the definition of an attack under international humanitarian law. So it says attacks means acts of violence against the adversary, whether in offense or in defense. So does this mean that we can qualify the entirety of the operation as one single huge massive attack against Hezbollah, or that each individual pager detonating is its own individual attack? Uh, have one of your students help you. I'll try. Um, so there is, of course, there is a version of international humanitarian law that sees this as one huge attack. I don't, though. I see this as one single attack. So I don't see this as one single attack. I see this as several attacks. Each individual pager is an individual act of violence against the adversary. And so each pager is its own attack, which means that the principles of precaution, of distinction, and of proportionality, they need to be carried out for every single pager, not all the pages at once. So I've seen a lot of people say, look, if you have an operation where you can push a button and then you have 90% certainty that the people that will get blown up are all members of Hamas, there's two things with that. Number one, member of Hamas is not enough. Oh, ad. Okay, gotcha. So there's some people went on an ad, so we'll restate this in a second. Um, oh, there's a question here. Jorge 4554. Also, if according to you everything Israel does is a violation of international law, why would they be incentivized to follow international law? They can't just be expected to roll over and die. Well, I'm not suggesting that, and I don't think that everything Israel does is a violation of international law. I think the standard of international law is set out before Israel's actions, so it's the other way around. Like the rules apply, exist, and Israel acts in ways that contradicts it. So there are options. Like I said in the very beginning, there were alternatives. There were ways of planning this operation that could have made it illegal. That's the first thing I said. That when I first saw this news piece, I thought, oh, this might very well be legal. It might be difficult to carry it out, but it might be legal, right? So it's only after more evidence came out that I concluded that, at least for me, based on the information we know, and of course this can change, and there can be more information that comes out tomorrow, and Israel can come out and say, actually, these are all the precautions that we took, and even despite this, we caused incidental harm, but we took so many precautions and we still failed. It is only after the fact that this didn't happen and that I saw that there were instances where it was patent, that precautions were not taken, that I concluded maybe this is illegal. So I don't know. I'm I guess I disagree with the framing of the question, because you're saying, is everything Israel does illegal? Then I don't think everything Israel does is illegal. Um, I think it does a lot of stuff that are illegal. That's usually the case when you occupy a territory and deny the self-determination of a people for 75 years. Um, but and of course there is a there is the added problem of the International Court of Justice essentially saying that what Israel is doing is an act of aggression against Palestine, which does complicate the legality of Israeli actions. But at least with regards to Lebanon, um, I don't think that everything Israel does is illegal. I think Israel has every right, for example, to defend itself against um, the rocket attacks that Hezbollah sends to Israel. There's nothing illegal with launching the Iron Dome and shooting down missiles before they hit Israelis. On the contrary, the illegal act is the launching of the missile, right? So that's the war crime. The launching of the rocket is the war crime, not the Iron Dome. So I really don't see um, the question as representing me. Um, so you say militants should stop attacking if they know it is bad. Yeah, basically. But anyway, people are back from the ad, so now we can talk about Article 49. So, um, I didn't want to just ignore the question, because I know where it comes from, and it's good to be able to clarify it sometimes. And since you guys were on an ad, but okay, we're back at Article 49. There's a we have each and every one of these pager attacks is its own individual attack, and so for each of them to be valid, you would need to carry out a precautions, distinction, and proportionality tests together, right, for each of them. And so when the media says this was one single attack that was high tech and so discriminated to only attack Hezbollah targets, I would contest that, because one, it is not a single attack. Um, but it is several different attacks. So you should not refer to these as the pager attack. It's the pager attacks, right? And so, and the other problem is having a pager. If we have established that the conditions for being a target is to have a continuous combat function or participation in the armed force that contributes enough, if you want to take the U.S. position, having a pager cannot be enough to discriminate who is a target and who isn't within Hezbollah. So when the media says this single attack distinguished between Hezbollah and civilians to amazing levels, I disagree, because the criteria cannot be being in possession of a pager, because under those rules, little Fatima, the 9-year-old girl who died, would be a terrorist. And of course, a 9-year-old is not a terrorist, right? Or a valid target in conflict. She's a civilian, a vulnerable civilian at that, right? So just to clarify that in terms of what the media says, this is not a single attack, and just having a pager is not enough to distinguish between civilians and. I know there's a lot of stuff happening in the chat, including first-time chatters. I want to welcome you guys to the community, but I will finish what I'm saying and then I'll go through the chat. Okay. Um, so let's continue. Okay. So that's one thing. One thing is this is not just one attack; it's several attacks. Okay, and that changes the way that we want to deal with this from a legal perspective. Okay, um, because there is one of the prohibitions, one of the ways in which you can um, not carry out a legal strike is if you carry out a indiscriminate attack. I just want to read you guys the definition of an indiscriminate attack. That right there is actually that right there is Article 51 of the um, Additional Protocol to the Geneva Conventions, and it's the same one that we use for determining direct participation in hostilities in paragraph 3. But in paragraph 4, it says indiscriminate attacks are prohibited. Indiscriminate attacks are A, those who are not directed at a specific military objective, B, those which employ a method or means of combat which cannot be directed at a specific military objective, or C, those which employ a method or means of combat, the effects of which cannot be limited as required by this protocol. Okay? Remember that definition for a second so that you can follow what I'm going to say. Sorry. So, remember that I said that for the attack to be legal, you need to comply with protections, distinction, and proportionality. Indiscriminate attacks are a function of distinction, meaning you are not actually directing your attack to a valid military target. You are not distinguishing between civilians and combatants. So it's indiscriminate. You're not actually aiming at anyone. The reason why Hezbollah's missiles are um, war crimes is because those rockets are thrown into civilian areas without a specific target in mind. They are indiscriminate by their very nature. Right? So my argument is that these pager attacks follow a um, similar pattern, because from the moment that you got the pagers delivered to Hezbollah, meaning you gave it to someone in Hezbollah, not even knowing who this person would give the pagers to. You just assume that if you got a pager, it's because you are high up in the command and control organization and structures of Hezbollah, which might be in 90% of the cases might be the case, maybe, um, but you cannot say for certain that every single person that was going to receive a pager was going to be a legal, valid military target under international humanitarian law when you gave those pagers to Hezbollah. Okay, and that was 5 months ago. 5 months elapsed. And then you decide, okay, now I need to trigger my attack. I need to launch my attack. So far, your attack has not started. Now you want to launch your attack against the pagers, right, against the Hezbollah militants with a pager. What do you need to do when you are launching an attack? And let me show you here my next slide. This is Article 57 of the Additional Protocol to the Geneva Conventions. And it says, in paragraph 2, it says, with respect to attacks, the following precautions shall be taken. A. Those who plan or decide upon an attack. 1. Do everything feasible to verify that the objectives to be attacked are neither civilian nor civilian objects, and are not subject to special protections, but are military objectives within the meaning of paragraph 2 of Article 52, and that it is not prohibited by the provisions of this protocol to attack them. 2. Take all feasible precautions in the choice of means and methods of attack with a view to avoiding and in any event minimizing incidental loss of civilian life, injury to civilians, and damage to civilian objects. 3. Refrain from deciding to launch any attack which may be expected to cause incidental loss of civilian life, injury to civilians, damage to civilian objects, or a combination thereof, which would be excessive in relation to the concrete and direct military advantage anticipated. So from this text, you sort of already know what this is talking about. 57.2a1 says comply with distinction. Before you launch any attack, comply with distinction. And 57.2a2 and 3 are telling you comply with proportionality. Right? So when you decide to trigger all of those pagers, what this article tells you is you need to take some precautions. The main precaution here is you need to make sure that you are targeting a military objective. In other words, you need to make sure that the person that you're going to blow up with the pager is a member of Hezbollah that has a continuous combat function or at least sufficient involvement in the war effort to warrant status-based targeting, so the US approach, some theory, and that person is holding the following sound went off again. I'm sorry about that. I thought I had muted it. Um, but in any case, Sondi, welcome to the community. Thanks for following. So okay, so you have this like moment to attack, and you need to make sure that the person that you are um, attacking, detonating. I'm so sorry, Chi Steve. I don't know what to do. I will try to fix this. So the person that you are attacking needs to be um, verifiable, or at least likely to be a valid target. And we've established that owning one of those pagers is not enough to satisfy the criteria for membership and targeting. Right? So just owning the pager is not enough. You need to verify that there's a continuous combat function or some level of contribution to the war effort. Right? So that's what you need to do before you launch the attack. So if you were to do that, then that if you had done that, then that electronics shop that blew up in Beirut would not have blown up, right? Because you would have checked that that pager was in an electronics shop being sold by a random guy who just happened to have it. Because, you know, in the global south, sometimes you have a pager and someone takes it and then resells it, right? And in the global north as well, actually. um, but like sometimes that happens. Sometimes someone takes your pager and resells it, and you still detonated it in an electronics shop. So something went off with those precautions. But if you had checked also, then you would have noticed, oh, maybe little Fatima is holding that. But maybe little Fatima has that pager. She's not a target, so we cannot blow it up. Sure, you can tell me, well, but she was inside a home, so how could they know? Blah, blah, blah. Well, I mean, that's part of why this would be a very complicated operation, right? And you can say, well, but she's collateral damage. Is she? Was the specific person that you were trying to kill with that pager like a sufficient military advantage that warranted the death of an 8-year-old? Because I can't see how, unless like if you were targeting an average grunt, then how can you justify the killing of an 8-year-old, 9-year-old? I don't understand that. So enough is out there that we know that at least these precautions were not taken. Right? Because if they had been taken, then that electronic shop would not have blown up. Then Fatima would not have blown up. Then the 8-year-old boy would not have blown up. And then the guy who was right next to a teller in the grocery shop would not have blown up because you could have hurt that teller. So we don't know for sure if precautions were taken or not. But I think there's enough out there to convince me that at this point, with the information that I have, those precautions in attack were at least insufficient, or the standard was so broad that it rendered the precautions taken mute, moot, right? So if the precautions were don't detonate any pager that's on an airplane, okay, that's one level of precaution, but that's not what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to make sure that the person that has the pager in that specific attack that you're launching with that specific pager on that specific person is a valid target. If, as it seems, you didn't do that, then you didn't meet Article 57.2, Section A, subsection 1 of the Additional Protocol 1 to the Geneva Conventions, which is customary law. Right? So if you did not meet that, if you did not check that the military objective was in fact there when you triggered it, then if we go back to our Article 51, then we will see that we have in our hands an indiscriminate attack, which is prohibited because it is not directed at a specific military objective. Who did you direct that pager exploding if you didn't check who was holding it? No one. You just blew them all up and hoped that by sheer chance, most of the people that would have them would be members of Hezbollah that would have a continuous combat function or sufficient membership and collaboration in the war effort, whatever theory you want to use. But you were hoping that most would be, and most were, right? Most of the people that died apparently were members of Hezbollah. Some of those were as well military targets. That's not enough because it's not a single attack. It's several attacks, and each attack needs its own precautions check. So, since those precautions were not taken, what happened in Lebanon is a series of indiscriminate attacks that did not choose specific targets at the moment of launching the attack. Right? It's very clear to me that if everything that we know so far checks out, and I think it does, then it was a series of indiscriminate attacks that were launched against Lebanon. Right? So um, indiscriminate attacks are illegal because you don't know who's going to blow up. And so, just like Hezbollah launches a missile into a city without knowing where it's going to land, and therefore it's indiscriminate because they didn't actually choose, no, we're targeting this specific military base. No, they just shoot a missile hoping that it'll land somewhere where it won't kill, you know, kids or people going about their lives. In the same way, Israel detonated pagers not knowing who it would kill. And that is an indiscriminate attack. So when the media reports this as a discriminate attack, an attack that specifically target Hezbollah, it is wrong on two counts. It is wrong because it was not a single attack, and because each of those attacks was indiscriminate in nature and therefore illegal. Okay, that is the one, I guess, the major, the more fundamental point at stake in the pagers situation. Right? They are indiscriminate attacks under international humanitarian law, and therefore they are illegal. We can have a longer debate about this in a second. Just let me finish with this explanation. I have one more point to go through because there's one more potential issue at play, and it's that Israel has actually signed a protocol to the Convention on Certain this is difficult. The Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons. Oof, that's difficult to say. Um, that bans the use of this is not it that bans the use of booby traps. So this this protocol defines a booby trap as any device or material which is designed, constructed, or adapted to kill or injure, and which functions unexpectedly when a person disturbs or approaches an apparently harmless object or performs an apparently safe act. And other devices, anything not covered so far, is manually emplaced munitions and devices, including improvised explosive devices designed to kill, injure, or damage, and which are activated manually by remote control or automatically after a lapse of time. And I've seen a lot going on in social media about exactly what this means and whether it fits the definition of what the facts on the ground in Lebanon. I think these definitions do meet up with what happened to the pagers. Either because you believe that these are a device that was adapted to kill and which functions unexpectedly when a person approaches an apparently harmless object or performs an apparently safe act. So, like carrying a pager is an apparently safe act, right? But that pager has been adapted to function unexpectedly, right? Your pager is not supposed to blow up in your pocket when you carry it, right? So you're doing an apparently safe act, carrying a pager, and the pager is blowing up, meaning it is functioning unexpectedly. So the pagers would meet the definition of booby trap. Or some people believe that I've seen it in like in Twitter and stuff. Some people believe that booby trap, the pagers are not booby traps because there's an active component, like the person disturbs or approaches or performs an apparently safe act. So the person needs to do something. So because the person didn't do, like if you grab your pager and you press a button and then it blows up, then it's a booby trap. But if it just blows up on its own, then it's not a booby trap. And I just sort of like don't see the sense in this. It sounds like a very nuanced, very like not really, you know, certain distinction. It feels specious. Um, I think like for example, a trap is a trap whether I activate it or you activate it. Like uh, um, if I put a chocolate then with a stick in a box, does it really matter if it's you who crashes against the stick and drops the box on top of you, or if I pull a rope and then the box falls on top of you? It's still a trap. So I don't see this like active component as essential to the definition of booby trap. But even if you don't, then there's other devices, which means manually in place munitions and devices, including improvised explosives devices designed to kill, injury, or damage, and which are activated manually by remote control, which is essentially what happened, right? Um, they put devices in the hands of Hezbollah, um, which included explosives that were designed to kill, injure, or damage, and were activated by remote control. Um, so if they're not booby traps, they're other devices. I have seen people object to this definition based on the fact that it says manually emplaced, meaning that I need to go there and put the pager like on top of a Hezbollah person for it to be an other device under this convention. But that just makes very little sense um, because the language of manually emplacing um, doesn't necessarily mean like with my hand. Um, because then otherwise, imagine if you place a booby trap or or a device in a car and um, sorry, if you give a device to someone because you know that they're going to go in their car and they're going to drive away in their car, and then eventually in 20 minutes it's going to blow up, then that wouldn't be banned because you didn't then place the device in the car with your own hands. You gave it to someone and he placed it in the car. Makes very little sense. Okay, so either because they're booby traps or because they're other devices, I think the pagers are covered by this prohibition, which is a prohibition that Israel ascribed to. Okay, so what is the prohibition exactly? So Article 7 of this protocol says that it is prohibited to use booby traps or other devices. So we just define what they are in the form of apparently harmless portable objects which are specifically designed and constructed to contain explosive material. So again, um, you have constructed a pager, an apparently harmless portable object. Um, And I've seen people, protest saying, well, but the pager was not specifically designed and constructed to contain explosive material. It was specifically designed to be a pager and then explode, which I also find such a nuanced argument and such like way out there in like the specificity requirement because um, the whole point of the booby trap is that the object actually works. Like if I give you a pager that is broken, you will not be like it's a toy, right? You will not be led to believe that you need to keep it. You're going to throw it out. So obviously, this refers to pagers that work as pagers and were not specifically constructed as bombs, right? But anyway, it continues to say, without prejudice to the provisions of Article 3, it is prohibited to use weapons to which this article applies in any city, town, village, or other area containing a similar concentration of civilians in which combat between ground forces is not taking place or does not appear to be imminent unless either A, they are placed on or in the close vicinity of a military objective, or B, measures are taken to protect civilians from their effects. Right? So essentially what this is saying is that argument that people made in the beginning, someone in the chat mentioned, is it legal to target people that are far away from the battlefield? Generally, yes. But according to this rule, it is not legal to do so with booby traps or other devices, unless you take precautions to make sure that no civilians were harmed by the effects of that attack, um, which we have established or we have concluded that didn't happen, right? Or you place them on or in the close vicinity of a military objective. And this is where it gets tricky because a lot of people say, well, of course they were placed in the vicinity of a military objective. They were given to Hezbollah. But did it though? Were they actually placed in the vicinity of a military objective? Because remember, they were given to Hezbollah 5 months ago. So the placing of the device was not really done on or in close vicinity of a military objective at the time of targeting. So neither of the two exceptions apply, in my opinion. So yes, it would be an unlawful use of booby traps or other devices. I've been giving you the counter arguments to everything I say. If the counter arguments convince you, that's fine. We can have a debate. As far as I'm concerned, though, these attacks were therefore illegal based on two factors. Number one, it was a series of indiscriminate attacks where no precautions were taken to protect civilians from the attack, and Israel did not know who had the pagers at the time. And second, it was an unlawful use of booby traps or other devices. So under those two prongs, I think it is fair to say that the attack was illegal. So to the question here in the bottom, were the pager attacks, and you'll notice that I said attacks, not attack, were the pager attacks in Lebanon legal? I think not. Could they have been legal? Yes, they could have. If they had followed the rules that I have laid out here. I don't remember who it was that said, oh, everything Israel does is illegal. Well, yeah, because Israel is not respecting these sets of rules. Like, these sets of rules have been there for years, for decades. And we know them. Like, we apply them. It's what I do for a living. We study them. So you need to comply with them. So yes, if you don't comply with them, then what you do will be illegal. Okay, so that is my view. That is what I think about this pages, the attacks, right? Um, you guys have an ad in 2 minutes. I just want to be mindful of that. So let me go through the chat and see what questions you guys have had for me. I'm gonna go way up. Okay, I'm here with the um. Okay, I arrived in the part of the chat where Cheese Thief's ears were destroyed. Um. Okay, the Tricky Red says, silly question, but would each rocket strike be considered a single attack too, like the pagers? That is an excellent question, actually. I would think so. I would think so. I think each missile should have its own target, or at least all of the missiles should be directed at one single target. And Hezbollah would need to you know take precautions so that not one of those missiles is directed at nothing. That you always need a target. So it is an excellent question. It's not a silly question, and I think yes, I think each one of those, just like the pagers, each one of those would be its own attack requiring its own analysis. You cannot just so the only way in which you can say this is a single attack is if you have all the missiles going to the same target. Then that would be one attack. But the way Hezbollah acts is it just launches missiles without any target, and sometimes they land in sand, sometimes they land in football fields. So, given that that is the nature of the attack, Yes, they would each be a single attack, and they would need to do checks for every single one of them, and they don't. um, Bosco Baracus says, I have seen it phrased as an attack on Hezbollah's communication system. I assume that would be legal if there wasn't so much explosive in them to harm humans, right? So let's put it this way. If the attack had been to overheat batteries so that they break down, right? And some of those batteries had unexpectedly um, caught fire and harmed some Hezbollah members that were not military targets, I would say that would be a legal attack against the military objective, which would be communication systems being used for military purposes that had incidental harm to people that were not necessarily military targets. Some might have been military targets, and then you get like you get to strike them. Um, but that would have been a completely different strike. Right? That would have been a completely different objective. So if your objective was to destroy Hezbollah's communication system, then yes, the analysis would completely change. So this is what I say: like, not everything that Israel does is illegal to me. That would have been legal, but even if it led to the death of people that were not valid military targets, um, in a let's say um, proportionate level of damage, right? So you did not really intend to kill them, but they died nonetheless, right? So yeah, that would have been a completely different thing. It would have been a completely different attack, and we would be having a completely different discussion. Could it be that we could consider that the death of some of these not targets would be disproportionate? Yes, we could be discussing that, but the attack itself would not be discussed as illegal. Then let's see what else. Condor says that I'm more patient than him. Well, look, I'm an academic. I live for learning and debating and like teaching, and I don't think that I don't think I don't believe in just discrediting something and saying this doesn't matter. Um, your viewpoint is invalid. I do want to have an answer, even if it's an answer that is unconvincing to them, even if it's an answer that they still hate. I do want to have an answer. I don't want to just say you're an invalid interlocutor. It may very well be that someone comes to this chat and acts as an invalid interlocutor and we ban them or expel them from the community, or that can happen. This is not Twitter. Um, but I do want to have an answer. I don't want to just be silent and say, no, you don't get to ask questions. Eva Kier, first time chat. How are you? Welcome to the community. Says hello from Greece. I love Greece, by the way. I when I was young, I was obsessed with Greece. I taught myself how to write in the Greek alphabet so that I could write secret stuff. Um, Eva Kier says, could the ICC issue the arrest warrant under seal secretly? Um, well, that ship has sailed because the office of the prosecutor already didn't file the requests under seal. So we already know that the arrest warrants have been requested, but future arrest warrants can be requested under seal. Major of Carl says a lot of people killed were civilians, both in Lebanon and in Gaza and the West Bank. I'm not talking taking your. Oh, it's just okay. Sorry, it's about debate. um, Eva Kier says, I mean, in this case, is it possible they have been issued already? What have been issued? Can you please clarify? Just bear in mind when you ask a question that I will likely get to it after I'm speaking, so include the context so that I can, like, remember. Flip from Nowhere is fighting with Jorge H4554. Um, Merely belonging to Hezbollah doesn't make you lose your civilian status. That is correct. If you directly participate in hostilities, which means carrying out military operations or ordering them. So yes, there are civilians in Hezbollah which have IHL protections and aren't valid targets. That is correct. Yes. Then another jump scare. Um, So Peruvian Andy says what happens when the person is in a crowded market. That might be an issue for proportionality, right? Um, so that might make the attack illegal. Um, Magic of Carl says, I think this whole exercise becomes a lot easier if you imagine this operation taking place in Manhattan or central Paris. Sadly, that is true. I do think there's a lot of Orientalism going on in the discourse. I feel like much of international law today is premised on the idea that some parts of the world are bombable and some parts of the world are not. To the point where we have had cases where individuals accused of terrorism have been identified in, say, Europe, and they are followed through surveillance until the point where they reach Syria, let's say, to meet up with like ISIS or whatever. And it is only when they are in Syria that they are attacked, droned, and killed. They could have been under the same theory that justifies droning Syria. They could have droned him in London and shoot a missile in London and destroy a neighborhood to kill this person. But they don't. That would be unthinkable. Because London is not a geography that is bombable. I have an article coming out on this. When it's published, we can discuss this in more detail. But it is seen as this area of the world where explosions happen, so we can just continue with them. So I do actually agree that using the Manhattan example is useful for illustrating how catastrophic this would be seen had it been carried out by Hezbollah in Manhattan as opposed to like by Israel in Beirut. Cheese Thief says, "I love how Israel is doing free recruitment for Hezbollah." Well, that is the problem with like this mindset that war is the solution to everything, right? I don't think war solves much. So violence begets violence. Threat from Nowhere says, if some of these attacks are declared to have been illegal by ICC, what kind of penalties would follow and for whom? So, I mean, we don't know if this will be included in the ICC case because it's not covered by the same situation in Palestine. There currently is, to my knowledge, there is no situation on Lebanon in the ICC, so we would need to start a new case. I'm not even sure if Lebanon is a member of the ICC, so we would need to check that. But yeah, this falls outside of the realm of the ICC for now. Piero Giburo, hi, first time chat, welcome to the community. Could it be possible that Israel, says Piero, uh, couldn't control whether each individual pager explodes or not? Would it make it one attack instead of many attacks? Uh, so you're saying that there was one single button to trigger every single pager? Well, I mean, it would then make it sort of worse, right? Because if you plan that attack knowing that in advance, then it is even more indiscriminate, right? You would need to make sure that every single pager is in the right place before launching the attack, right? And that when you hit, sorry, that when you hit that button, um, you know the you would need to. It's as if you were telling me I grabbed a machine gun and I just rained bullets onto a forest. There's not much I could do with the machine guns. I was just hoping that I would kill, I don't know, the Viet Cong, right? That's how the weapon works. There's nothing I could do. And then you kill three little kids. It's part of your planning, part of your means and methods of war to make sure that the attacks that you're carrying can comply with international law. Right? So I think that would be worse, actually. Razanov, oh hey Razanov, how are you? Says, to be honest, I think the pager walkie-talkie attack is the dictionary definition of terrorism. However, I consider the argument of the prohibition on booby traps to be 100% more convincing than the argument from proportionality and distinction, which appear to be dependent on opinion and prone to futile argumentation. That's fair. I gave you both angles of attack in case you were more convinced by one than the other. I'm more convinced about the indiscriminate attack actually one, but then I have strong views about how to define membership in armed forces. Um, as to the definition of terrorism, there's no international definition of terrorism. Precisely because there's a lot of disagreement about who can commit terrorism and in what circumstances. So, one person's terrorist is another freedom fighter, or can states actually commit terrorism, are huge debates under international law. My own personal view is that if you purposely target civilians to terrorize them, or you purposely target civilians for gratuitous reasons, then I will call you a terrorist. Um, and as far as states committing acts of terror, I'm not against using that terminology. I do think it can be it can end up being a more political than legal term, and we should be mindful of that because there's no official definition. So, sure, you can use the term. I don't have a problem as long as we accept and understand that the category under international law, when you want to describe legality or illegality, doesn't really exist. What does exist under international humanitarian law is that attacks that have the main objective of terrorizing the civilian population are illegal. So, to some, that means that terrorism is an illegal method of war. Um, that makes sense to me. Um, and so the main problem is, when can you say that an attack has as its main objective terrorizing the civilian population? Um, because what if there's two objectives, right? What if one is, sure, causing chaos and panic in Lebanon, and the other one is destroying the communications devices of Hezbollah, and the other one is killing a few Hezbollah militants? Can you say that that is the main objective, is to cause terror in the population? Um, I'm not. I'm not sure. I think the law is like a little poorly drafted, I guess. But I would say that this attack clearly caused terror in the civilian population. And when you go beyond that like very narrow set of pages and you start talking about electronic shops blowing up, or you start going into solar panels blowing up and random stuff blowing up to the point where people are scared to turn on the toasters, or scared of their phones, then I think you cross a barrier into, okay, the point of this is to cause terror. At least one of the main objectives is to cause terror. So I would argue that this attack, especially after the third day, when solar panels started blowing up and electronic shops started blowing up, I would say, I don't know if this is the dictionary definition of terrorism, as Rasinov says, but I do think it is an attack that crosses the boundary into an attack that is illegal, both because it is indiscriminate and because it has as its main objective, or one of its main objectives, to cause terror in the civilian population. So yeah, Rasinov, we agree. We arrive at the same place through different avenues, I guess. Right? Peruvian Andy agrees with us. Hey, hi, Peruvian Andy, by the way. Um, Fled from Nowhere says, the banning of the use of these kinds of weapons includes the phrase other devices, whose definition in turn includes which are activated manually by remote control. So these pagers attacks seem to fall squarely into what's banned in this protocol. Yeah, I agree. I agree as well. Glitter times beard says, so this booby trap convention, what sanction does it include for states that sign and then violate it? Well, that's the problem with international humanitarian law, right? One thing is it tells you what is valid and what is invalid, what is legal and what is illegal, and then international criminal law sanctions you, right? So we would need to get this to a tribunal and then sanctioned as a war crime. I mean, it would be a war. The crime that you're looking for here is war crime. 3 Mustafar 66 says 3A seems to be a factual descriptive condition. So legality would not depend on Israel making sure it is placed by a military objective at the time of targeting, but just if it was in that vicinity, planned or not. Um, Let me put it this way. If you put a device that you can remote trigger next to a tree, and you wait until a valid target sits there and then detonate it, that would be okay. But if you put that in the tree and then go home, and from your home, without even looking, you push the detonator, that would not be okay. Cheese Thief says, whenever the U.S. uses drone missiles, it's required to ascertain the target's identity as possible combatant for every missile launch. So why wouldn't Israel hold to the same standard? So this is actually a huge like topic of discussion here because the United States in the Iraq War engaged in something that was known as signature strikes. Signature strikes are the kind of strikes that happen when you don't actually identify a specific target in the sense that you know a name and a last name and everything, but you argue that what you are targeting is likely a military target. So what they did is, like, for example, Al Qaeda used black turbans, and they used to have more money than the average, Iraqi or Afghani or Afghan, right? So if you had someone that was a male between 18 to 24, I think it was, using a black turban and a very expensive watch, that was enough for them to say that you could be a military target under signature strikes, and they would shoot you. That was, of course, absolutely illegal because you haven't actually identified a target. Um, so this is the problem with drone warfare and like modern warfare in general, right? Modern warfare is complicated. It's difficult. It should be difficult, right? It's not. You're not in a battlefield where, like, obviously the person in front of you shooting at you is a military target because he's shooting at you because he's wearing a uniform. No, we're in like complex wars, so we do need to identify things better than through signals. And if signature strikes were illegal, then these pager strikes were even more illegal, right? Oh, hi, Boulevard of Dreams. Welcome to the stream. Nice of you to show up. Um, Iconoclast says, if someone at a non-military institution in Lebanon, such as a university, had received information that pages were tampered, are they legally bound to inform someone or blow the whistle, or is there something like military secret? Uh, I mean, I think under duty of care, you would be obliged to like whistle it. Um, I don't see under what. I mean, unless you're a spy for Israel or something, I don't see why you would keep quiet. Hello, Green Day. I actually love Green Day. One of my favorite bands. Um, oh, really? No one had gotten that Boulevard of Dreams is. Oh, okay, well. Fled from Nowhere says Israel didn't aim at a particular Hezbollah valid target. Militants with known face and name in these pager attacks, they simply had their front company sell those booby trap pagers to people they believed to be members of Hezbollah. Question: is that the chief basis why the attacks were indiscriminate? I think so. Yeah, I think the main reason is because they weren't able to check that they were attacking valid targets. Like we could have a different discussion if it turns out that they did a test for like uh, most pagers say, and they concluded that most pagers were in the hands of like Hezbollah members, and so only a few people that weren't Hezbollah members would be harmed. We could enter that territory if more information is revealed, but it just doesn't look like it from the evidence that we have available. The main problem is there was no precaution. Sorry about the really loud sound. Um, but we do have a new follower, so um, yeah. Thank you, Huckfin, for following. Uh, what is a rate? Oh my God, we have 109 viewers. Hey, welcome everyone to the community, I guess. That's never happened. Um, what is a raid? Oh my God. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Let me see what other questions we have. Uh, Iconoclast says, true, no one would have ever thought to bomb the Bataclan because there were terrorists inside, but we've been hearing that's okay in Gaza for 12 months. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of arguments going around that's like states will always take their own citizens' lives as of higher value than other countries' lives, and I just find that argument repelling. I don't believe that's how it should um, work, I guess. Um, I think all life should be valued equally. I'm so sorry, Cheese Thief. I will remove the box for the next stream. Um, so Cheese Thief says there was that one excerpt from a kid that said he didn't like when the skies were clear because that meant drones would be dropping bombs. He liked it better when it's gray because the drones won't be around during those times. Pretty morbid. Yeah, of course. I mean, drone warfare is a horrible way to do warfare. It dehumanizes us and it makes us pretend like we're just shooting at video games when we're not. It's not a video game. It's real life. You actually are killing people. And the standards for using drones are so lax. Like there's a famous case in the United States, Anwar al-Awlahi versus the United States, where this you know guy was a propaganda mouthpiece for Al Qaeda, and they droned him. And I don't think you should be droned for being a propaganda outlet. I think you should be droned if you are. I mean, I don't think you should be droned in violation of another country's sovereignty, but like you should be a target in an armed conflict when you have a continuous combat function, right? Then Threat from Nowhere says, oh, talking to Piero. Razanov says, I spoke of dictionary definition of terrorism. Yeah, okay. Uh, but yeah, we agree, Razanov. So Flat from Nowhere says, at the risk of being overly technical, the wording of the Geneva Protocol says acts or threats of violence, the primary purpose of which is to spread terror among the civilian population, are prohibited. I guess Israel could argue our primary purpose wasn't that, but only to eliminate Hezbollah. Yeah, this is the same problem that occurs with like the special um, um, mindset for genocide. Like, oh, we're not really trying to commit genocide. We're just trying to defeat Hamas. And I just think this is a misunderstanding of how intent and how like objectives work. You don't need to actually want something to happen for that thing to be happening because of you. So there's two ways of approaching intent. You have the purpose-based approach and the knowledge-based approach. Under the purpose-based approach, if you want something to happen, like say, I want to spread terror in the civilian population, and you do it, then you wanted that to happen. Under the knowledge-based approach, you don't need to actually want it. You just need to know that if you do that, terror will be spread among the civilian population. And yet, even knowing it, you still do it. So it's the same for genocide, right? You don't need to actually want the population to be destroyed. You just need to know that if you continue to be doing what you are doing right now, the population will be destroyed, and you still do it. So it's knowledge based. You know that terror will be caused, and you still do it, right? As opposed to you want terror to be spread. So yes, Israel would be able to argue that they have a purpose-based understanding of this article, and I would say that I mean most authors now would rather have a knowledge-based approach to intent. Yeah. So I don't think that's actually an obstacle fled from nowhere. Um, so Mustafa 66 says, if all pages exploded by central activation, would that be indiscriminate or disproportionate? I think that would be indiscriminate. If you just press a button and just explode everyone, who are you actually targeting? Um, Bosco Baracus says, now that I think about it, I am still a bit confused. To my question above, you said that just killing the batteries of the pages would most likely be legal, but wouldn't it still be as indiscriminate? Does it only count as an attack if it is likely to cause physical harm? So that is a good question. Um, but I think if if the target is not people, if the target is the device, then you have actually so if you let me go back to the definition of indiscriminate attack. Hold on. So if you look at the definition of indiscriminate attack, it says those which are not directed at a specific military objective. This is Article 51, numeral 4, Section A. Right. So in this case, you will have directed the attack at a specific military target. The specific military objective would be the pagers, the communication system of Hezbollah, not the people. Right. So you would have actually directed the attack at the valid military objective. That's the difference. I don't know if that makes sense to you. So it wouldn't be indiscriminate because you have discriminated your target. You said not people, objects. Oh, I just saw N7KKI rated with a party of 24. Thank you. Thank you for doing that. I really appreciate it. Now we're 52 people talking about this. Um, Boulevard of Dreams says, is there a possibility, or rather, how likely do you think it is that international law will become obsolete after the explosions? Because other countries like Russia will take Israel as an example and carry out similar operations if the international community does not act tough enough against Israel. Well, I think that's happening already, right? With drone strikes and like humanitarian interventions and willing or unable standards. I think there's a really good presentation. I'll see if I can include it in the Discord channel. And like, if again, we have a Discord channel in this community, so since we have so many guests here, thanks for the raid. Um, Someone might just, if you can just put the invite for the Discord channel, that would be great in the chat. Um, um, I'll try to find it and put it there. There's a great um, presentation at a conference by a friend of mine, Kevin John Heller, a very good international lawyer, um, and he makes the case that when international criminal law has was negotiated from the 1990s to today, the global South and international law in general, the global South tried to limit the ability of global powers to commit war crimes, to launch wars, and to attack other states. And global North powers consistently tried to not allow them to, but to push them into accepting more flexible, more aggressive rules of international law. And his argument is, had the global North listened to the global South, then we wouldn't be in the situation right now where you have like Russia saying that it is using humanitarian intervention and democratic intervention in Georgia and in like Ukraine and and things would be easier if we had a more restrictive set of rules than the ones that the global North advocated for. So I do think you have a point. I do think international law is struggling right now. But I don't think this will be the breaking point. I think we have been seeing several points, I guess, and eventually um, we might just see other states doing the same, just like Russia ended up saying, "Oh, I'm using humanitarian intervention to intervene in Georgia." Then you might just see states destroying communications devices in war more often, or maybe non-state actors and claim, "Well, Israel did it, so why can't I?" And this is why it's important to be on record saying this is not an evolution of our interpretation of international law. This is not um, a clever new way of attacking in the 21st century. This is a violation of international law. If anyone else does this again, it will be a violation of international law. This is why I think it's important to state our cases clearly now, because whatever we allow Israel to do, or the United States to do, or Russia to do, we're also allowing everyone else to do. Right? So we need interpretations of international law that are consistent, not politicized. And I think that is very difficult for states to achieve. Most of them just put their interest first and the law second, right? Hack Finn, how are you? It's your first time chatting, so welcome to the community. Uh, if the shoe was on the other foot, what would they call it? I have no idea what you're talking about. Um, So Blatt J Vic says rate means another streamer ended their stream and brought their viewers to come watch you. Oh my god, that's so nice. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Um that's really nice. Um so Flat from Nowhere says I didn't know about these two intents. Yeah, it's actually I have a paper on this coming up, so when it's published I'll do a stream about it. Huckfin says, in my opinion, the pagers were victim-operated IEDs, basically a communications-based minefield. The victims can be combatants or non-combatants. I don't know if IEDs, because IEDs, the I in IED is improvised, and I don't think this was improvised. I think it was very much planned. Um, but yeah, illegal. Hi, Altitude Cherenkov says, what do you think would happen if the ICC doesn't issue warrants for BB? Huh. Okay, another easy topic. um, so look, enough has happened for me to think that arrest warrants would come. Like there was that statement that Israel mistakenly released, responding to the arrest warrants ahead of time, right? So I think that means something. And also, Israel recently filed two briefs before the International Criminal Court to argue that it's going to object to jurisdiction and make a complementarity check. to invalidate the current investigations, right? It wouldn't want to do that if it knew that arrest warrants were not coming. So I actually don't think that that's the problem. I think the problem is the procedure to get there. Israel is manipulating the procedure to elongate it, to extend it artificially, and that is the main problem. I don't think the main problem is going to be there won't be any arrest warrants. I hope not, at least. I think from what we've seen, Israel seems desperate enough that it could be that it feels like the arrest warrants will come. Huck Finn says the intent was multi-purpose: disrupt communications, kill or disable combatants, instill distrust in communications devices, instill fear and terror upon the intended targets and the civilian population. Yes, and under a knowledge-based approach to intent, if you knew all of this and still did it, then you intended it to happen. Um, so, look, I think, Harald Charenkov, I think the situation of Palestine right now, the whole situation, it has become almost like a litmus test. Um, oh, there's an ad break right now. I think it is important to understand that how we approach this case of Palestine right now will go down in history. People will ask you, what were you doing while this was going on? People will bring up your tweets for better or worse, like on both sides. Like I'm sure my tweets about this will like stay on the um, in the cybersphere for a very long time, and people will like splatter them to me, saying, "Oh, you're a terrorist supporter or whatever," because of how they misread them. Um, but I think it also, yeah, I should have snoozed that ad. Sorry about that. But I think it also like this litmus test of Palestine. It is helping us do a transition from one understanding of international law to another. The way we have understood international law from, I guess, the middle of the 20th century until today is always thinking in terms of, well, that's how it is. It sort of sucks, but we accept that it sucks and we move forward. And I think the question with Palestine is so connected to coloniality. And if you want to go see my video on post-colonial approaches, I think I just uploaded it to YouTube. Um, the question is so connected to coloniality and to settler colonialism that you actually do end up moving the discussion of international law towards a critique of the system, not just as a trying to understand the system, but as critiquing it as the product of a set of rules that is not designed by people who think like me. International law is designed by states. The states have interests. So I think we're moving towards an era where critiquing international law is going to be a lot more mainstream than it is right now. Uh, and I think that's the biggest contribution that the whole discourse is going to have. It's almost tragic if you think that we have to go through this to make sure that we can critique international law openly and in a more fundamental way. But I think that's the main difference of the before and after Gaza is going to be that um, before and after Gaza, international law critique is going to be a lot more legitimate after than before. And for someone like me, who's a person that has a critical approach to international law with a post-colonial mindset, um, that's that's a positive development. Critique of international law as a product of colonialism should be more mainstream than it is right now. The Tricky Red says the famine engineered in Gaza does hold under knowledge-based intent too, right? Yeah, I think that's the biggest argument for genocide that we have right now. Because I think the famine subjects people in Gaza to conditions of life that make their life impossible. So it is um, let's say, um, evidence that you knew what you were doing and you still did it. That's why South Africa says in its case that the supposed humanitarian protections that Israel is carrying out in Gaza are part of the genocide because they know they're not doing enough. I mean, come on, we have ministers, Israeli ministers, saying that they agree with those who say that it's important to create diseases in Gaza because that means less soldiers die. Um, so yeah, I do think that falls under knowledge-based intent. Iconoclast says, sorry for the off-topic, but are there things happening currently in the ICJ genocide case front? Are there so South Africa needs to file its memorial. I don't know when, but sometime in the next months. I don't know. Other than that, no, I don't think there's anything happening right now unless there's another request for provisional measures. But at this point, I don't think that there will be. I think it's clear by now that Israel is just going to not comply with provisional measures, and South Africa can't really afford to uh, use its time to file an ever never-ending amount of provisional measures instead of focusing on its memorial. So the way the case will work is South Africa will file a memorial, Israel will file a counter memorial, then there will be a reply from South Africa and a rejoinder from Israel. And then there will be a hearing where oral argumentation will be carried out. And then after that, the court will deliberate and issue a judgment. This will take several years, like 2 to 5 at the very least. So this international justice moves slowly. Yeah. Okay. So let me know if you guys have any more questions. Razanov says, as South Africa said, they'll file the memorial in October, apparently with some delay with respect to the deadline. Okay. Well, that's interesting. South Africa has right now like a huge dossier that it filed to the Security Council on the concept of intent, which I found very useful. I'll try to find it in the internet and post it in the Discord group. Again, if someone can share the invite for the Discord group, taking advantage of the fact that we have like more viewers than normal, I'd appreciate it. Um, but yeah, then if it's if it's um if it's gonna file its memorial in October, then that's the first step of the written procedures. Okay. Does anyone else have any other questions that you want to discuss? We're getting close to the end here. Um, please fix the mix volume for the next stream. Uh, Kiev metro is droning. Oh, you're in Kiev. Solidarity with what happening with what is happening there. Yeah, I will remove the chat box and sorry the alert box and see what I can do from ground up. Sorry about that. You can't find the link to the Discord group. I'll see if I can do it later. Hayat Cherenkov says, why does the ICJ have verbal deliberations? Is it from the legal tradition it follows? I mean, yeah, it's a hearing, so it's better than just write everything. Cheese Steve says, would the pager attacks technically count as an act of aggression? Well, they are definitely unlawful use of force, I think. So that depends on whether you are using the definition of the Rome Statute, probably not, or if you're using the definition of the Friendly Relations Declaration. So I guess depends, maybe. Yeah. Flat from Nowhere says, turn up your mic volume. Yeah, I know. I don't know what's going on. Um, I wonder if it's the. I don't know why the volume is so low. I've tried. And I don't know what to do. Um, but I'll try to fix. I don't know what's going on because when I use this on the PlayStation, it really doesn't have any problems. It is generally just when I do it from my laptop. So it's weird. I don't know what's going on. I I have the microphone in top volume, so I don't know what's going on. I'll try to fix it. I'll try to ask around as well. Thanks for sharing the invite, Cheese Steve. Razanov says, do you think the latest Israel briefs to the SEC may cause a delay? Yes, I do think they may cause a delay. If anything, just so that the court can, dismiss them in the best case scenario. Okay, so we've been on this. Oh, thanks, Evakir. Thanks for following me on Twitter. You can follow me here as well and join the Discord. It'll be fun. Um, 3 Mustafar 66 says, in what sense would it be unlawful use of force if Israel is engaged in hostilities with Hezbollah, which not only shoots rockets? Yeah, because there's two different things, right? There's the armed conflict with Hezbollah, and then there's Lebanese sovereignty. And there's a lot of discussion. It's too late in the game for me to start talking about that right now, but like, can you justify violating Lebanese sovereignty on account of the conflict with Hezbollah? Is a big topic of discussion. There's a big debate in international law. I believe not, and some others believe that yes. Magic of Carols, thanks. I'll store it somewhere. Oh, thanks for sharing the Discord. Magic of Carols. Um, so um, Glitterbox says reflections on Twitter feud with Oz. Look, I no, not really. I follow Oz, and I think his work in Ukraine and Syria is good. I'm very sad that like we had this like huge meltdown. I really would rather not talk about it. Um, just be nice when you talk to people, I guess, is my better conclusion. Jorge H454 says, was Paris a war zone? I mean, was Beirut? I don't know. Beirut wasn't a war zone. Um, okay. Uh, Guys, we've been at this for an hour and 50 minutes. It's getting late, so I'm just gonna end the stream. Thank you so much for your time and for being here, and welcome to all the people that are here from the raid. I really appreciate it. If you can follow the channel or subscribe to the channel, I would really appreciate it. It really helps me out as we're trying to get the community to grow. Please join the Discord. Um, Bosco says that I've gotten better in a short amount of time. Thanks for that. I'm having a really good time doing this, so hopefully we'll continue to do this going forward. And yeah, thank you so much for being here, for giving me your Saturday afternoon from wherever you are, whatever time of the day that it is over there. I'm gonna be ending the stream now. I will see you on Wednesday, where we will be playing The Last of Us and talking about human rights again. I think we're gonna end the video game now, so I'm really excited about that. And please start thinking about what other video games we can play together. And remember, when the not if, but when the ICC issues its decision on the arrest warrants, I will do a special stream just for that. Okay. Also, I also have a YouTube channel if you want to follow me. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for your questions. I hope this was useful. I hope you learned. I certainly learned from you challenging me and asking questions. Have a nice weekend, everyone. And yeah, thank you.